Here we are in the filler update, yet we got some of the most interesting lore from the Hexenzirkel yet again. When this update was teased, I was ready to just flop on that and do less work than I usually do from past updates, at least for this game, and then focus my attention on Anfield because I haven't made a new video on it since my last one. Please, I have a good reason why. The story is respectfully kinda mid so far, and I don't know what else to say other than that. New video incoming, I promise. That said, the new Mondstadt event is basically reenacting of things that could have happened in the past but it never happened. I'm a bit surprised actually that this event is related to Farca's animated shorts, so today's video will be interesting. Today, we'll do a very brief recap on the quest, what we learned, and what this might foreshadow in the future. Yes, you hear that right, this event is foreshadowing something. As always, don't forget to give this video a like and comment so the channel can be noticed by the algorithm. My name is Glitchxcity and I make lore and commentary videos on this channel to keep you company. But before that, let's pay some bills. Now that Farca is out, it's not surprising if a lot of people want to pull for the man. I mean, look at him. Huge muscles, manly face. Previous men could never, except for Alhitam. I love this man to death. Of course, for one to get a Farca, one must surrender their possession to the Farca. And that's why Lootbar is here to help you with that. Lootbar has been a long-time partner of this channel now, and that's because I use it myself. They provide cheaper crystals compared to in-game prices, supports consoles, supports Miliastro and the LAN, and they have packages that guarantee you to get characters you want. All you need is to enter your UID, no personal information required, and your items will arrive quickly. Over 36,000 Trustpilot reviews are showing their satisfaction after using Lootbar, and their customer service is always available if you need assistance. Aside from Genshin Impact, other popular games are included in Lootbar as well, including the newly added Arknights Anfield. Click the link in the description below and register to get an additional 10% coupon that can be combined with all of the discounts and receive special discounts for returning customers. Now let's continue with the content. The entire quest in itself is actually straightforward. Personally, I recommend you to play Farca's story quest first because the event is a direct continuation of that story. The Knights of Avonius are creating an event to welcome everyone from the expedition back to Mondstadt, and in order to do this, they plan to recreate the major events that have happened while they were gone. In other words, our journey in Mondstadt. The Hexenzirkel is involved in this, and using Alice's magic, they create a magic bubble in a completely different space to simulate that using everyone's memories. The entire quest in itself is very fun and day one has nothing noteworthy, but we do learn Klee's father's name is Kleiner. We also learn her name is a combination of both her parents' name, with Kleiner using Kle while Alice using E at the end of her name. Kleiner's name meant little in Germany, so Klee's name basically meant Little Alice. I won't go too deep on this one and we can talk about this in another day, but if you want a deep analysis, you can watch Minslip's video instead. Now the interesting things start on day 2, where Fenty reveals some interesting things about the Archons, or himself really. If you remember the cutscene at the end of Mondstadt's chapter, Fenty was defeated by Signora, and he didn't even land a hit on her. The community was very split about this because they thought Harbingers are stronger than the Archons, or some thought that Fenty is one of the weakest Archons in the game since he said so himself. The other half said Fenty was holding back because there's no way an Archon could be this weak. Turns out, the latter was the correct one. Fenty was holding back against Signora because if he used his power, the prize was the entirety of Mondstadt. If you remember the Easy Breeze Summer Resort questline, he revealed he was the one who swept Marejivari's timeline, and he is implying that would be the case if he wanted to defeat Signora in his encounter. That is bizarre because this literally shut down the theory that Fenty is the weakest Archon in the game. To put a nail in the coffin, Fenty does not care about his gnosis, and this further solidifies my theory that the Archons never cared about their gnosis except Mavuika, because she is a human and likely does not know the true nature of it being Savalainen's corpse. The Archons were said to have shown disdain towards the heavenly principles anyway, and he said that Signora could have easily negotiated with him instead of trying to defeat him head-on. It worked with Zhongli and Nahida, and you can say the same with A because why Miko did it in her stead. New Valette also didn't care about the notice since he already obtained his authority, and looking at the circumstances, it doesn't seem neither does Fossilor because all she cared about is to give her authority back to him. You can even count Kalabina in this case because she never cared about the Tsaritsa's grand plan and she gladly gave all of her powers after a negotiation. In other words, no one really cares what the Tsaritsa is doing, and if anything, they low-key supported her decision. Now of course, that whole scene only solidifies my theory, but that doesn't mean it's correct either. There is a huge chance what I said is wrong, and there's nothing wrong with that. The third day is where it gets interesting, but I'll skip the unimportant parts. So we learn on the third day that the magic bubble is bugged, and it's not just an ordinary bug, but it's corrupted by the abyss. When creating the bubble, Nicole and Alice cut off the part where the traveler purified Dvalin. They thought the whole thing was not that important, which, to be fair, I can't really blame them because that part of the story was not that important anyway, and everyone could easily forget it being the case. Now that I think about it, I feel like this whole thing is just the writers admitting that they forgot the Traveler could purify the abyss. Because they only addressed that the Traveler have this power since Natlan. I'm not joking. Even in the world quests from Liyue to Fontaine, they never addressed that the Traveler has this power. Whether this theory is true or not, it's just so funny to think about. Since the whole thing is reenacting the events of things that could have happened, Dvalin was never purified in this timeline because the Traveler never appeared to purify him. You might remember Farca's animated short where instead of Dvalin being purified, he was sealed by Fenty, and this also injured him significantly. However, sealing him is just a band-aid solution because the abyssal corruption inside Dvalin further spreads inside him until he can no longer be purified. Even if the Traveler purifies him, it's just the same as killing him. Literally the same case with Reverie and Roland where they have become one with the abyss. After you defeat the Abyssal Dvalin with the help of Real Dvalin, which by the way the cutscene is pure cinema, literally 1.0 cutscene with Luna 5 budget, Alice further explains what actually happened. So she speaks in riddles here, or honestly more like advanced language if that makes sense. The Traveler suggests that what happened in the bubble is if fate never changed, but Alice denies this being the case, but rather fate that will not come to pass. I know that sounds weird, right? Because at first glance, they don't sound that different. However, if you read what Alice told us carefully, the difference is that fate did not change in the bubble. Dvalin was always fated to die. Whether Farca changed his direction or not, the outcome remains the same. You should know how fate works in this game by now, and the best way to describe it is literally what happened in Fontaine. Fossilor's plan was to let Fontaine drown, but the process going through it is to kill herself in order to return Nivelette's Hydro authority, forgive the Fontainians because he is the judge of Fontaine, and then they are saved. It's as easy as that. Fate did not change. The outcome of it did not change. Everything played as planned. Let's hear the prophecy again.
It says that every person in Fontaine is born with sin. No matter how the nation of justice holds trial after trial, this sin cannot be absolved. Until one day, the water levels in Fontaine will rise, and the sinful people will slowly be drowned. In the end, the people will all be dissolved into the waters, and only the Hydro Archon will remain, weeping on her throne. Only then will the sins of the people of Fontaine be washed away.
To put it simply, the whole thing is fulfilled. Fontainians are sins, they are dissolved, the waters rose even before the flood, which we saw in the fortress of Meripede and Poisson, but the moment Nivelette forgave them, not only they became true humans, but they were also forgiven from their sin. It's the same as what happened in this quest. Dvalin was destined to die, and no matter how many times they tried to prevent it from happening, they couldn't because the Abyss would kill Dvalin regardless. Now that I think about it, this is something that I find interesting and maybe a lot more relevant than I thought, which comes to what Barbeloth thinks about the Abyss. So Alice told us that the Abyss did appear inside the bubble, but unlike what we always thought, it actually came out of nowhere, or what Alice said, nascent. To put it simply, nascent is synonymous with just beginning, budding, or what my language would say, newborn. The essence of the abyss lies within those fates that will not come to pass. I know that sounds strange, doesn't it? Because the abyss has always been there and in fact actually came from the outside world. So how? Well, to put it simply, the abyss is destructive in nature and it always seeks to destroy anything it sees without any reason whatsoever. But then why does it have to be that way? Well, I think Paimon describes it perfectly. They are hatred that stems from not being chosen. They are fates that are never meant to happen, or in other words, fates that are not chosen to happen. Fate came in many different ways, and they came into many possibilities. In how the world of Teyvat works, everything is already predetermined. So what happens to the rest of these possibilities? They are eliminated, and this fate form into abyssal energy, stems from hatred from not being chosen. If I can give a real-life example, the abyss is a Karen. Literally just that. No matter how many times you try to calm them down, they still demand to speak to the manager, and even after they spoke to the manager, they still continue to become a menace to the society. Also, Alice is punished for fish blasting with Klee, and this is where the offense story ends. Pretty interesting, isn't it? It's just a filler event, yet for something that is this nostalgic, the lore we received is mind-blowing. With that said, I am excited to start theorizing. Like always, if you made it this far, then it's good to assume that you enjoyed this video. I want to let you know that I'm planning to reach 100,000 subscribers by the end of this year, so if you can hit that like and subscribe button, you're helping this channel a lot more than you might have thought. With that said, let's continue. One thing that immediately crossed my mind when I wrote this video is easily Wings of the Silent Moon. You might have watched one of my videos that I uploaded some time ago, and when I wrote that, I found it so weird why the Heavenly Principles is inside Pahola, which is always theorized to be the abyss. Of course, that's just my theory, but we are told by the wing that the place is filled with abyssal energy. Pahola is also the same as that, and if you search what it meant in Google, it is described as a malevolent Northland. We are revealed by that wing that Pahola, presumably Pahola, is inside a raven's belly and Whitehair's eye. Do you know where these two animals are located? On top of the reversed Irminsul tree. We are revealed in this quest that the abyss are hatred of fate that is not chosen, which now comes into question. If the Irminsul is the embodiment of Teyvat's data, then does that mean the very core of the Irminsul is actually abyssal in nature? Remember what Rukkhadevata said? The forbidden knowledge came from the very depths of the abyss, and they contain some sort of truth that can't be understood by its inhabitants and is constantly being rejected by the world. If you think of it carefully, that means the forbidden knowledge doesn't come from the outside world, but it came from Teyvat's other possibility that never meant to happen. Alice also said to herself, these sort of things happen a lot on the world's borders, and we know that the fate of Teyvat is tied to the false sky. This kinda makes you think, doesn't it? If fate are events that never came to pass, then it makes sense why the Traveler can absorb abyssal powers, don't you think? Being a descender means they are not affected by Teyvat's rules, and is the reason why the Valiant's fate changed in the first place. I think it's also the main reason why the Traveler is not affected by the abyss, because why would he be affected by them if he can change them? Why would he be affected if he is that variable to begin with? Now, if Pahola is indeed where the forbidden knowledge came from, then it wouldn't be too far-fetched to think that this is also where the abyss came from, or at least where the unwanted fates were stored. Besides, I think this isn't too surprising in a way, because if the Irminsul in itself is the embodiment of Teyvat's fate, timeline, and history, then what happens to the one that is discarded? They are likely in the recycle bin, and that recycle bin is Pahola. The moment it starts to overfill, it will also attack and become a nascent form of abyssal energy. Now, if we assume that the Heavenly Principles is inside Pahola right now, wouldn't it be weird why they would absorb something that they try to avoid? Unless the Heavenly Principles need some sort of abyssal energy to keep themselves powered up. And I really like what Cat with Blue Hat says when they address the Traveler's power, because it might be a different type of abyssal energy, and this could likely answer why that's the case. Let's say maybe, just maybe, the Heavenly Principles is absorbing all of this abyssal energy in order to keep the order of this world intact, because again, The Abyss is basically just unwanted fate. I think you are not familiar with this term, but basically, the Sea of Stars is an unofficial term that the community, or at least the wiki, uses to describe worlds outside of Teyvat. The reason this even exists is because of Octavia and Miliastra Wonderland. Yes, I am not joking, Miliastra Wonderland also has lore, and each costume didn't just come out of nowhere, but came from different planets. For example, the last Christmas-themed Wonderland is called Snowstar. This ninja costume came from a planet called Elysium Star, and many, many more. Believe it or not, Earth, our planet, apparently exists in this universe as well, and I would assume this Earth is Honkai Impact's Earth, but you get the point. Since the Abyss came from the outside, then it wouldn't be too surprising to imagine that these worlds encounter the Abyss, or maybe are already affected by the Abyss. That said, this also reminds me of Skirk's world, because if you remember, her world already adapted to the Abyss, but surprisingly, they were fine. Even Skirk was surprised with this information because she had no idea that her world is already affected by the Abyss, that no one in her world is corrupted. This is the very reason why a neighboring planet will first attack her planet, because they see it as a threat. But with the newest information we got, it's very unlikely that her world will attack anything anyway, because Skirk's world is different. Unlike Teyvat, where everything is already predetermined, Skirk's world, from what I know at least, has none of that. It could be the reason why the Abyss doesn't attack Skirk's world. Now this also reminds me of Nibelung, because as we already know, he was the first who got corrupted by the Abyss. The most common and acceptable reason why he left Teyvat is because his world is destined to be destroyed as per Seudr Voinen. With that being the case, Nibelung left Teyvat, trying to find any way so his world could be saved, and he returned already corrupted by the Abyss. It kinda makes you wonder, doesn't it? Where did it came from? The Sea of Stars is very vast and wide. There's no way it just came out of nowhere, right? Well, from what Alice told us, it seems that could likely be the case to begin with. But instead of Nibelung being corrupted by an outside variable, he could likely have corrupted himself. What if his desperation is what makes him corrupted? What if that fate of unable to save his people engulfs him and corrupted him in the first place? Although, I think there's another possibility. You see, the Descenders are individuals that can rival this world, and it seems they are people that are not only capable of changing the fate of Teyvat, but also are able to absorb fate in itself. So instead of just absorbing or purifying the Abyss, what if the Descenders are absorbing fate? If the Heavenly Principles is inside Pahola right now, do you think they are currently absorbing fate from within the very depths of the Irminsul? If Nibelung has to take 1,000 years before returning to Teyvat, do you think they are absorbing fate from different worlds, making himself strong enough until he can truly save his world? Because if that's the case, the Traveler's powers make a lot of sense now, don't you think? Remember what Skirk said, the Abyss don't just disappear, but could manifest into many different forms. I think you saw this coming, right? I'm pretty sure you do. Unfortunately, mosquitoes have invaded my home, and no matter how many times I try to repel them, they keep on coming. That being said, I don't know anything about what's going to come. All I saw was the name and a very small glimpse of the map. For the sake of this channel, I will not mention these mosquitoes. However, as much as I want to admit that being the case, the root of this theory lies within another theory I made in this channel, where Alice could be related to Asmoday. In one way or another, we know that Alice is a long-lived species. She was born prior to the Cataclysm and already has the figure she has now since then. That said, I would like to propose that just like Zubai and Fenty, Alice is related to Asmoday, and it's possible because of that reason why Alice shares some similarities between her. I'm not talking about just visual similarities, but also their powers. Both Fenty and Zubai have the power of time, and Alice has the power of space manipulation. This type of power is not the first time we saw, but is actually the fourth time. First was the Golden Apple Archipelago, second was Velivrium Village, third was Simulanka, and fourth is what we're experiencing right now, the magic bubble in this event. Since Asmoday could be the one that is responsible for maintaining the false sky of Tevat, it's good to assume that she was also responsible in having to create the false sky as well. Of course, I am well aware that the angels created them by using the heavenly principles as eggshells, but at the same time, I feel like Asmoday has to play a role in it at some point. However, I also would like to point out something interesting about her, and that is the cubes that she created. We learn in the God's Limits trailer that Asmoday created many spaces within whatever this place might be. The Shades have to invade every single one of them for one reason: to find Asmoday. With that said, instead of this space being other worlds that the heavenly principles visited, what if these spaces are fate that she decided to store? What if these fates are the ones that are not chosen? What if they were stored in order to prevent the worst thing scenario from happening to Tevat? Because maybe to the heavenly principles, they're not the happy ending, if that makes sense. I think the heavenly principles knew that keeping these fates intact would make Tevat prone to abyssal invasion, so in order to avoid that, they tasked Asmoday to lock them in a separate space per se. Now I doubt the heavenly principles don't know this would be the outcome, and by that I mean locking this space would turn them into the abyss. Besides, like what Alice said, the abyss is extremely complex and cunning, and even with what Barbelot said, it's only the closest interpretation. Besides, hatred is quite complex to begin with, let alone carried by all hatred from the fates that will not come to pass. Let's just say Asmoday locks all of these fates. What makes it impossible to not have the new ones to appear? Now that I think about it, perhaps locking our twin could be Asmoday's way of intervening in the first place, because our twin is a variable that can destroy Tevat, which comes into question. If our twin carries all fates that will not come to pass, does that mean they are originally a descender in the first place? Is it because absorbing too much fate made them no longer a descender? Or maybe they need to absorb as much abyssal power as possible to become a descender? Because in order to become a descender, they need to rival the fate of this world. And what sort of things could do just that if they can absorb the abyssal power within this world? Wow, I did not expect this event to have the capability of making me think like this. Regardless, I have a lot of fun making this video. The next few videos will be about Arknights Anfield, and I hope you look forward to that. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you haven't already, and I'll see you on the next one. Tjena!